What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back with the box office breakdown for Sunday, May 17th, where The King of Pop is back at number one in spite of having already played in theaters for 4 straight weeks. But this past weekend, Michael grossed $26 million domestically and is now sitting pretty at $703 million worldwide, opening the question of, can it beat Bohemian Rhapsody, which made it to $911 million worldwide back in 2018. But irrespective of whether or not the movie can reach that milestone, the enduring popularity of Michael Jackson remains undeniable. I was down in Virginia this past week for my little brother's graduation from JMU. The night before, there was a big family dinner, and we were discussing the movie as well as Michael Jackson. But the table was made up of a group of people ranging from age 20 to 76, and everybody had something to say about their love and affection for the best moments from Michael Jackson's career. And pretty much every single person at the table had already seen the movie, and the question now is, can the movie make it to $1 billion? We'll know in a few short weeks, but the most interesting story of the weekend is the performance of Obsession.
Have you ever actually, flirted with Nikki?
I'm gonna go get some shots.
I'll come with you if she means this much to you. And I know she does. To say, Nikki, I think we should grab a drink sometime.
Which opened to $16 million, which is absolutely fantastic because this low-budget horror film written and directed by Curry Barker was produced for only $1 million. But keep in mind, last fall the movie sold to Focus Features for a rumored $14 million. So Curry Barker and his investors, they've already been well taken care of. But the big question is, how much money will Focus Features make off this investment? And the good news is people absolutely love the movie. Got an A- cinema score. And this almost never happens, but over the last couple of days, people kept DMing me on X saying, how come you haven't reviewed Obsession yet? And I kept saying, I was out of town for graduation. I'll talk about it in my box office breakdown. But almost never do people get so excited where they're kind of poking and prodding, saying where's the review? Where's the review? So let me say a few words about the success of Obsession. I think the success story of Obsession is one of the coolest things to happen in the movie business all year, even cooler than the success story of Markiplier with his movie Iron Lung, because Markiplier, while he enjoyed a slightly bigger opening, he was working with recognizable IP, whereas Curry Barker, he wrote and directed an original story, and as I always say on this channel, if you're a young filmmaker and you want to tell original stories not based on IP, the horror genre is your closest friend and ally. And he's proving that YouTube is a perfectly viable platform for launching a career as an independent filmmaker. Because people keep falsely saying that this is his feature film debut, but back in 2024, he had a movie called Milk and Cereal, which did incredibly well on YouTube. And it is my genuine, sincere hope that a lot of other content creators out there will look at the success that Curry Barker's enjoying and say to themselves, you know what? I want a piece of that action. I want that prestige. I want that acclaim. Because for years now, I feel like we've been seeing a massive brain drain phenomenon where a lot of really talented people who in a previous era might have become independent filmmakers instead are creating content for YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, etc. And admittedly, there are a lot of people making really cool short films and a lot of really interesting stuff on these platforms. However, it's come at the expense of good filmmakers. And if you don't have cool, young, independent directors now, you're not going to have the aging veterans 10, 20, 30 years from now. A lot of the best and brightest directors right now were independent directors in the 1990s. Think about people like Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan, or even a filmmaker like Richard Linklater, who remains incredibly prolific, but they all got their start as independent filmmakers back in the 1990s. And my hope is that a lot of the best and brightest content creators out there will say, you know what, I'm going to take a crack at making a feature film because YouTube is totally fine. We don't have to worry about brain drain on YouTube. Last year, YouTube generated $60 billion in ad revenue, and compare that to the $9 billion in North American box office generated by the movie business. So I feel like, if anything, the movie business should be doing everything in their power to try to lure talent away from YouTube back to the movie industry to tell some scripted entertainment. I mean, I'm on YouTube all the time. I'm well aware there's a lot of good shit on there, but I do love a good narrative, a good story, and I feel like the movies provide an opportunity for telling narrative stories that you just don't get when you're watching 4 or 5 talking heads on YouTube talking shit about how the latest movie really sucked. And I totally get it. I like the kind of content too. It's very addictive, it's very fun, it's very exciting, but every once in a while I feel like those people should put their money where their mouth is, make a short film, make a feature film, and you realize just how hard it is. And I dabble in the world of independent filmmaking as a producer. I've worked in the world of animation, and I'm now working in the world of documentaries. And if you look at my IMDb profile, you'll see that I've tried to keep one foot in both worlds. But as I frequently say on this channel, whether you're looking at the movies as an art form or a business or a bit of both, what it needs more than anything else is youth. It needs young filmmakers and young moviegoers, because 30, 40, 50 years from now, I'm going to be long gone. You need more people or new people who will continue to watch this crap and make this crap. Otherwise, movies will go away for good. And one of the best places right now to find young moviegoers and young talent is on the big platforms like YouTube. So once again, I hope that Curry Barker will be the first of many, because in the 1990s, basically the era of my youth, I turned 14 the summer of 1990, and I turned 23 the summer of 1999. Basically, we're talking about like my high school and college years. But we had so many incredible young filmmakers in the indie scene that made it an incredibly exciting time to go to the movies. Going to the movies, especially independent films back then, was a little bit like following like your favorite local bands and so on and so forth, where you felt like the greater public at large didn't know who these people were, but we knew who they were. Like Richard Linklater making movies like Dazed Confused. It was a classic situation of a young filmmaker making a movie for young people where they would just quote ad nauseum. But the interesting thing about Obsession is that even though it's made by young people for young people, it's appealing to a much wider demographic. Because I was down in Virginia this past week, and it was actually my stepmom, who's in her 60s, who was like, we need to go see Obsession. I wanted to go see the 40th anniversary re-release of Top Gun, but she wanted to see Obsession. I was like, you know what? People are freaking out about this movie. It'll probably come up in the weekend box office, so I'm thrilled that I saw it while visiting family down in Virginia. But it's really hitting people hard emotionally, because I feel like everybody has a weird relationship story that they can kind of like look back on or point to, where they say, you know what, this movie, whether you're talking about from the male point of view or the female point of view, it will remind people of some of their troublesome relationships from a bygone era. And without naming any names or pointing any fingers, I was laughing during the movie, not because I wasn't scared, and there were some scary moments, but there were some moments where I was like, oh my God. I remember precisely going through a situation like this, fucking decades ago. And I feel like it really, even though it's obviously through the lens of a horror story where you have like a monkey paw scenario of where what you wish for ends up coming around to kind of bite you on the ass. But all the individual moments in the movie are incredibly relatable. I mean, a perfect example is seeing an overly attached girlfriend guilt-tripping the shit out of her boyfriend just because he wants to go to an event that's been described as like a boys' night out scenario. Or waking up in the middle of the night and knowing that the person you're in bed with is not only awake, but they're completely, totally irate at whatever your latest behavior might have been. So I definitely had a good time watching the movie, primarily because the actress who plays the character of Nikki just did such a great job. And I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce her name, but it's spelled Enda Navarrete, but I think she'll definitely book a lot more gigs based on this work. What she reminds me of is Mikey Madison or Sophie Thatcher or Anya Taylor-Joy when they were first getting started, where you have a very beautiful brunette who's kind of mysterious, kind of scary, kind of dangerous, but she totally stole the movie. My only complaints about the movie would be in like the first 30 minutes or so, it had a little bit of that theater kid energy, which sometimes is off-putting, sometimes engaging, but it definitely felt like there were way too many scenes where the actors were allowed to kind of improvise or explore the space, or maybe just some of those actors weren't as good. Like the actor Cooper Tomlinson, who plays Ian, I thought he was not on the level of an actress like Enda Navarrete, and perhaps the movie could have put its foot down on the gas pedal and gotten to the horror ingredients a little quicker. But the reality is, anytime a YouTuber goes off and makes a horror movie for $1 million, sells it for a rumored $14 million, and then that distributor goes off and has an opening weekend of $16 million, basically, everybody gets to enjoy the win, everybody gets to enjoy the weekend, and I hope that the future will be very bright for the career of Curry Barker moving forward. But let's look at some of the other movies in the top 10, like The Devil Wears Prada 2, which grossed $18 million this past weekend, but it's now sitting pretty at $546 million globally. That's incredible. That's way in excess of the original movie, and it's doing really, really well internationally. 370 of that 546 comes from international markets. But with Michael and The Devil Wears Prada 2 and Obsession enjoying so much success, that comes at the expense of some other movies where they're kind of being deprived of oxygen in this incredibly competitive environment. Because Guy Ritchie had a new movie, In the Gray, and I was totally unaware that this movie was coming out until a few days ago. But it only opened to $3 million domestic. But the movie stars Jake Gyllenhaal and Henry Cavill, two actors who have worked with Guy Ritchie in the past. And the trailer made it look pretty good, but I did not get a chance to see it because, once again, I was out of town this past week. But if anybody out there saw it, you tell me, why is In the Gray not connecting on the level of something like, I don't know, like Aladdin, Guy Ritchie's highest grossing movie? I never saw Aladdin, but that movie, I think it grossed more than $1 billion or close to it. My favorite Guy Ritchie movie, I'm just going to choose the basic answer. It remains Snatch. He's obviously had success with other franchises and other stories and that sort of thing, but I feel like Snatch is still his best calling card.
What's that?
This is a shotgun, so?
It's a fucking anti-aircraft gun, Vincent.
Yeah, well, I want to raise some pulses, don't I?
You'll raise hell. Never mind pulses.
But another movie that's kind of struggling is Mortal Kombat 2, and perhaps it's premature to ring the alarm bell, but it did suffer a 65% drop between weekend 1 and weekend 2. And keep in mind, the movie only cost $80 million to produce, but it's only grossed $101 million globally so far. And as I always say, if you use conventional movie math to take into account the revenue split with the theaters as well as the marketing expenses, a movie typically needs to gross about 2.5 times its original budget in order to begin to break even, at least theatrically, meaning that this movie needs to make it to 200 million globally to be considered a theatrical success. And who knows, maybe it'll find greater success on digital and on streaming and that sort of thing. But as I've said in previous videos about Mortal Kombat 2, I think it did an excellent job of appealing to the diehards, including certain Easter eggs or callbacks to the games. We're like, all right, that's a finishing move I recognize, that's a character I recognize, blah, blah, blah. What it failed to do was create an engaging movie experience where it would kind of cross over to the casuals and the normies, where it needed better fight scenes or better music or better screenplay, things that like just normal moviegoers say, you know what, I never played the games, but this is pretty cool. I think the movie only appeals to the gamers, and that's why we're seeing kind of a limited performance, at least so far. But it could be worse because the concert film created by Billie Eilish and James Cameron already fell out of the top 10 entirely, creating room for the 40th anniversary release of Top Gun. And both Top Gun as well as Top Gun Maverick were back in the theater this past weekend. But I saw Top Gun in the theater when it was originally released. I was 10 years old. It was my first summer away at camp, and there was like a field trip to go to the movies one day. You could go deep sea fishing or see a movie, and naturally I chose a movie.
I feel the need for speed.
The two things I remember most from seeing that movie in the theater. First and foremost, hearing a giant theater of girls squealing and screaming during the volleyball sequence. They just absolutely lost their minds. But another memory I have, a buddy of mine from my camp, he'd already seen the movie before camp started. And I asked him, like, are there any naked ladies in the movie? Like, even then I was concerned with nudity in movies. And he's like, well, when those scenes are coming up, I'll hold up a pinky just so you know they're coming. So, of course, we're hearing Take My Breath Away, and we're seeing all those silhouettes and that sort of thing. And I'll never forget looking over at him going, yee, and holding his pinky up. It was ridiculous, but obviously, Top Gun, gloriously entertaining, introduced Tony Scott to the Western world. He'd already had movies like The Hunger, which hadn't necessarily been like that big of a hit, but Tony Scott would go on to do, True Romance and Crimson Tide and Man on Fire and all these incredible movies. He had an absolutely legendary career, and he definitely left us way too soon. But it's incredible how here we are 40 years later, and Top Gun can still put butts in seats. But as somebody who's obsessed with old movies, I love seeing a 40-year-old movie putting butts in seats on a very competitive weekend where there are a lot of options in the marketplace. Because here in New York, we have a lot of revival houses that play old movies. But like, I took my little brother to see Deliverance at the Paris Theater a couple weeks ago, and there were like 4 people. Admittedly, it was a matinee. It was like 2 in the afternoon for a more than 50-year-old movie. So you expect us to see a handful of people. But anytime somebody successfully dusts off an old movie and is able to crack the top 10, well, that puts a big, giant smile on my face. And hopefully it'll lead to more people discovering the films of Tony Scott in the future. But I think it's time for me to head over to Variety and get the opinion of the experts. So Rebecca Rubin has this covered with an article titled Box Office, Michael returns to #1 in 4th weekend. Obsession starts strong with 16 million. Michael has moonwalked back to #1 at the domestic box office, earning a strong $26 million in its 4th weekend of release. In a sign of remarkable staying power, Michael towered over several more recent releases, such as The Devil Wears Prada 2 and Mortal Kombat 2, as well as newcomers like the Focus Features horror film Obsession, Amazon MGM's thriller Is God Is, and Black Bear's action-adventure In the Gray. So far, the Michael Jackson biopic has generated $283 million in North America and a staggering $703.8 million globally. It already ranks as the highest-grossing musical biopic in North America, outpacing 2018's Bohemian Rhapsody, $216 million. The Queen biopic is larger at the worldwide box office with $911 million, though Michael should eventually supplant that record too. Second place went to The Devil Wears Prada 2 with $18 million from 3,830 venues in its 3rd weekend of release. The star-studded sequel has generated $546.2 million in global ticket sales, including $175.9 million in North America and a massive $370 million internationally. Obsession enjoyed the strongest start among new releases, landing in 3rd place with $16 million from 2,615 theaters. Audiences and critics were enthusiastic, awarding the film an A- grade on CinemaScore exit polls and a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, which bodes well for box office longevity. Opening weekend crowds were 59% male, while 40% were between 25 and 34 years old. YouTube breakout and first-time director Curry Barker directed Obsession, which follows a hopeless romantic who makes a twisted Faustian bargain to win his crush's heart. Focus acquired the R-rated thriller out out of Toronto Film Festival for $14 million. Let me push back on what she said. This was not his first film, as I pointed out earlier. Milk and Cereal was his first film. It just didn't play theatrically. It played on YouTube, but it was still a feature film. But back to the article, another weekend, another well-made, low-budget horror film overperforming at the box office as David A. Gross, who publishes the box office newsletter, Franchise Re. And let me pause to interrupt again because we have Passenger coming out this week, and we've got Backrooms coming out the following week, and we still have Hokum playing in theaters as well. I feel like it's a very juicy time to be a fan of the horror genre. In the Gray, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Henry Cavill, and Aissa Gonzalez, opened at number 9 with a muted $3 million from 2018 locations. Guy Ritchie directed the movie, which has lousy reviews, 46% on Rotten Tomatoes, and tepid audience reaction. B grade on CinemaScore. Like many of Ritchie's films, including The Gentleman and Wrath of Man, the plot of In the Gray follows an improbable heist mission. This start is well below average for Ritchie, says Gross. Ritchie's films often do well overseas with their British source material and characters, but we don't see particularly strong foreign box office here. Not far behind, Is God Is debuted in 10th place with $2.2 million from 1,510 theaters, a smaller footprint from other new releases. Alicia Harris directed the R-rated film in her feature directorial debut and adapted the story from her 2018 play, which follows two sisters, Broadway favorite Carrie Young and Mallory Johnson, on an epic quest for revenge. Is God Is holds a sterling 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, as well as a solid B+ grade on CinemaScore. Elsewhere, on domestic charts, Mortal Kombat tumbled to 4th place with $13.4 million from 3,534 theaters in its sophomore outing. Those ticket sales mark a sharp 65% drop from opening weekend. The Warner Brothers video game sequel has generated $62.6 million in North America and $101 million globally after 2 weekends of release. It cost $80 million to produce. Sheep Detective rounded out the top 5 with $9.3 million from 3,554 screens in its second weekend, a decline of just 38% from its debut. The crowd-pleasing mystery has grossed $29.6 million in North America and $58.7 million worldwide against a $75 million budget. Paramount's concert film Billie Eilish Hit Me Hard and Soft, the tour, live in 3D, which also opened last weekend, plunged to the number 13 spot. Despite strong reviews, the movie earned a paltry $800,000 from 2,613 theaters in its sophomore outing, a harsh 88% decline from its soft $7.5 million start. Ticket sales stand at $9.2 million domestically and $25 million globally. Hit Me Hard and Soft was produced for $20 million through a partnership with Paramount and Interscope Records. Enthusiasm is high as Hollywood and theater owners prepare for Disney's Star Wars The Mandalorian and Grogu, which officially kicks off the summer movie season over Memorial Day holiday frame. That's because several overperforming blockbusters such as Michael, The Devil Wears Prada, as well as the Super Mario Galaxy movie and Project Hail Mary have propelled the overall box office 16% ahead of last year, according to ComScore. All right, so it's prediction time for Star Wars, The Mandalorian, and Grogu, which I'll be seeing Thursday afternoon and reviewing that night. But as far as box office goes, some people have said it might open as low as 80. Some people have said it might open as high as 95 here in North America. And depending upon how much you love, hate, or are indifferent to the Star Wars franchise these days, everybody's trying to kind of discuss those numbers in a different light. For the die-hard Star Wars fanatics that are convinced this movie is going to gross $2 billion, and spoiler alert, it will not. They're saying, oh, well, the movie didn't cost as much, and so on and so forth, so $80 million would be totally fine. And for the people who fucking despise Star Wars, and there are a lot of them, and that hatred has been well earned by a lot of terrible shows over the last couple of years, they're saying, all right, $80 million, that's a sign of a franchise in decline, and the sooner you stop making Star Wars movies, the better. As far as I'm concerned, this little fucker is the devil. It's cute, but it doesn't talk, and it remains a perpetual baby in spite of being, like, I think 80 years old in the show. But I'll make a promise. If I hate the movie, I will publicly execute this little bastard on Thursday with a knife. And if I like the movie, I'll pet him, give him little kisses, and rub his belly, and I'll be nice to him. But I couldn't resist ordering a prop from an upcoming review. But I have no idea if the movie will be great or not. My prediction is that the movie's actually going to open pretty strong. Jon Favreau, whatever you think of his movies on an individual basis, he's a very reliable commercial director. Whether you're talking about Iron Man or The Lion King or whatever the case might be, the dude generates massive box office, but not always, on the level that Disney might hope for. And I'm sure Disney is clamoring for and begging for $1 billion success story. I think this movie is going to open around 90, and there'll be some people think, you know what, it's harmless, good fun. Like, everybody should just calm the fuck down. But I have a feeling long term, it'll probably top out around 500 million worldwide. And what does that say about Star Wars? Well, I think it's just a franchise that's been horribly mismanaged. over the last 10 or 11 years by Disney. The fact that they have a little baby that can't talk as the star of their new movie tells you everything. They're trying to make these movies for little kids when what they should be doing, if they were to take my unsolicited advice, would be make it an epic, hell-raising tale of high adventure that'll appeal to teenage boys and guys in their 20s, the kind of people that'll watch it 10 times, that'll bring their friends, that'll bring their brothers, that'll talk about it incessantly, who will, scream for video game adaptations, basically like the diehard nerds that like laser swords and people working on engines and all that crap. And if you can get the babies in, and if you can get the girls in, awesome. But don't chase away your core audience at the expense of the larger one. And so many movie franchises fall into this trap where they're trying to go for the widest audience possible, but they lose the core audience in the process. And it's basically you're trying to tap dance across a bunch of laser beams or walk across a tightrope in order to navigate who is the demographic that you are ultimately seeking. But I think Disney, in the end, they're appealing to small children. They want people to put their kids in front of the TV, turn on Disney Plus, and just let it ride. Just let it play and play and play on a loop. And I would argue that's precisely what has destroyed Star Wars over the last couple of years. Because shows like, Mandalorian and Grogu by season 3, fucking terrible. Or Obi-Wan Kenobi, fucking terrible. Star Wars The Acolyte, fucking terrible. Ahsoka was just kind of like weak or mediocre. What other terrible shows were there? Book of Boba Fett. That was god-awful when all the Power Rangers started showing up at the end. Yeah, they've run that franchise into the ground primarily by overemphasizing Disney Plus, which once again is the babysitter for small children, and they should just try to make a balls-to-the-wall, kick-ass science fiction fantasy movie. But we will know in a few days' time what the movie has to offer and what kind of box office it might generate. But let me know your predictions down in the comments below. Once again, I'm saying 90 million opening weekend, but eventually it'll top out around 500 million worldwide, and we'll see how accurate my prediction might be. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell. I would greatly appreciate it. Hope everybody has a great week, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.